Imagine this. Mom and Dad go on a date night. They leave the babysitter home with a note. Does the note include all the things the kids cannot do while Mom and Dad are gone? No way. No one can guess all the things kids might try to get away with. Instead, they wisely leave a statement of permissions, what the kids may do. For example, they may watch a movie after finishing homework. That short list of permissions demonstrates that the parents know two things. First, kids like screens more than homework, and second, the kids will most likely try to do them in the wrong order, if they do the homework at all. Knowing their kids, the parents also include a very short list of prohibitions. For example, no screen time until after 8 o'clock. This solves a lot of problems all at once. In the same way, the Founding Fathers knew governments can be like immature, self-indulgent children. So they left us, the babysitters, with 3 notes. First, the Declaration of Independence is our introduction to the British King and Parliament, like a kid who tried to get away with some really ugly stuff, just like all governments do. Second, the Constitution, which has its own lecture in this course, includes a list of permissions and a short list of prohibitions. Third, the Bill of Rights expands on that list of prohibitions just in case the Constitution's strict list of permissions wasn't enough. Neither list of prohibitions is presumed to be comprehensive. Let's start with the Declaration of Independence. You know its statement that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In saying this, Thomas Jefferson drew from great authors like Aristotle, Cicero, and John Locke. He also drew on a long religious tradition in which rights are characteristic of created persons, meaning that the source of our rights is God. But even though our rights come from God, are supported by a great intellectual tradition, and are not a grant or privilege from any government, they are protected by law and exercised in the context of political society. This is why we often call them civil rights and civil liberties. If we want to identify our rights and liberties precisely, we therefore have to move past all this flowery language in the first part of the Declaration and get to its second part. There, Jefferson moves away from abstract ideas and towards a point-by-point legal indictment of the British king that justifies American independence. These abuses of colonists' rights, these injuries and usurpations, Jefferson calls them, makes the king a tyrant who implicitly abdicated. According to legal tradition, because the king had broken his contractual obligations, the colonists were freed from their obligations to him. Jefferson's list has 4 implicit categories. The king and Parliament had denied them 1, due process. The king denied the colonists their legal rights. This included refusing a fair trial by one's peers and subjecting them to lengthy trials in faraway places. 2, rights to self-defense. The king's army not only attacked the colonists, but left them at the mercy of hostile mercenaries and American Indians with no defensive force under their own control. 3rd, religion. In 1774, Britain had established Roman Catholicism in what is now Canada, and American Protestants had railed against it for over 2 years. Jefferson alludes to Quebec in the Declaration as a foreign jurisdiction. 4, property rights. The colonists were subjected to taxes and other financial demands to which they did not consent, including prohibitions on trade. So when you look at the Bill of Rights, written for the new American government, we find some familiar prohibitions. 1, don't mess with free speech. There wouldn't have been a Declaration of Independence, much less 10 prior years of effective protests, without free speech. Free speech stops tyranny. 2, don't mess with religion. Morality and virtue were considered essential for limited government, and religious establishments at the federal level could also be disastrous. 3, don't mess with guns. The Second Amendment only makes sense in the wake of a revolution. No one wins a war started by resisting disarmament and then guarantees the right to shoot a deer. 4, protect due process. The king tried to stop his enemies by denying them due process. 5, keep government local. The 10th Amendment says that most government responsibilities should be handled locally and by the states, not the federal government. This decentralizes power. However, did you know that some founders considered a Bill of Rights unnecessary? Some argued that all these prohibitions were obvious, going back to the Magna Carta of 1215, the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679, or the English Bill of Rights of 1689. Some others argued back that even long-standing implicit rights can be neglected or forgotten. Second, since the Constitution was understood to be a statement of permissions, a list of prohibitions could go on forever, like our babysitting list. If it wasn't in there, the federal government wasn't supposed to be doing it. Why attempt a list of prohibitions if the permissions were clear enough? But remember our bad kid example. Permissions are helpful, but a few prohibitions are important too, especially if the kid is predictable, and our government's ever predictable. Third, some argue that rights are already protected at the state level, and the federal government didn't have much power anyway. Sadly, that's completely inverted now, which makes the Bill of Rights even more important. Fourth, any statement of rights could be easily abused, a kind of trump card to assert preferences that aren't really rights. Unfortunately, this prediction came true as courts created rights rather than letting the people decide. But on balance, we're still better off. Our Bill of Rights is why Americans, unlike so many other people in the world, including our British cousins in Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, still have so many rights. Our founders were like those wise parents who left the babysitter with good instructions. We don't call them the founding fathers for nothing.